Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back to Webster Speaks series and our 13th edition of Webster Speaks, dialogues on race, equity, and inclusion. I am your moderator, Brian Bale, a graduate student at Webster University and the graduate assistant of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Tonight, we will explore diversity as it relates to sexuality and the Black transgender community. You can ask questions on Twitter using hashtag Webster Speaks or email me at brianbarley14 at webster.edu. Again, it's Brian, as in Brian, Barley, Barlay, 14 at webster.edu. We will get to as many questions as we can. And now, here is our host, Webster University Chief Diversity Officer, Vincent C. Flewellen.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome. Those of you who have previously attended Webster Speaks may be familiar with Earl McCoy as our moderator. Earl has accepted a position at his alma mater, and he could not resist, and we wish him nothing but the best. He says that he promises to stay in touch, and it's possible that he's out in the audience tonight watching us. And if that's the case, hello, Earl. I'm pleased, however, to have with us Brian, my graduate assistant, who will be graduating in May. And we are so glad that he has stepped up to fill in these shoes. And I look forward to the next several episodes with him. Before we get started, I just want to say that the opinions expressed by any speaker, panelist, or participant as part of the Webster Speaks represents the individual views of the person expressing these opinions and do not represent statements made by or on behalf of Webster University. The university presents this forum for educational purposes and to encourage academic discourse. I'd also like to thank those of you who have donated in the registration process in support of our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the university. Thank you. We'll begin by saying that Black lives matter, Black trans lives matter. When we look at the LGBTQIA community, sometimes the T for transgender is overlooked. Many Black trans members have been discriminated against and even murdered and abused because of their sexual identity. Today, we have here two women in the Black trans community who will discuss their experiences and perspectives. We hope to shed light and raise awareness about these issues. Our guests today are two trans activists and diversity and inclusion facilitators in St. Louis. Joining us is Jordan Braxton. She is an activist who focuses on raising awareness around HIV and AIDS. She is currently a prevention specialist at Vivint Health, formerly the St. Louis Effort for AIDS. She also has raised money for several organizations and is involved in the entertainment business. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you. Also joining us is Gabrielle Souza, and she has much compassion for humanity and philanthropy and has background in healthcare. As a trans Black woman, she enjoys educating others about diversity and inclusion. I know we're going to be doing a lot of educating tonight. First, let's identify the word transgender. Merriam Dictionary defines it as relating to or being a person whose gender identity differs from the sex the person had or was identified as having at birth, or being a person whose gender identity is opposite the sex the person had or was identified having at birth. So first question, Gabrielle, I'm sorry. Do you agree with that definition?
Yes, I do.
How do you define transgender who are not accepting or familiar with the term?
I'm sorry, can I have the question again?
Yeah, I guess what would you say to folks who might not necessarily agree with that term?
You know, in a lot of the work that I do, and like, my thought process is, as the definition speaks to, it basically outlines what it is. And I mean, if you don't agree with that, then I don't really know what to tell people. People that, give a little pushback on that, of course, that comes with like educating and like speaking to that and using those definitions and things like that. I will say that as we move forward, in defining, what being transgender is, the umbrella continues to grow. I'm sure that Jordan agrees with me. There's a lot of identities that currently, fall underneath that umbrella. And I think that ultimately, just listening to these talks and these experiences and people's experiences and understanding that and like really grasping that.
Jordan, what would you say trans is not?
Well, trans basically can be anything you want it to be. As long as you don't identify with the sex you were assigned at birth, then you're trans. Like Gabrielle, I'm sorry. It is an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of different identities. Under there can be gender nonconforming. There can be intersex people. And there can be trans people. So it just depends on where you fall on the trans spectrum, because everything is on a spectrum, just like sexual orientation and gender identity. Trans people are also on a spectrum. And when people say what is not trans, well, we know anyone who identifies with the sex they were assigned at birth, they're not trans, they're cisgender. So anything outside of that, just like on a pain scale from white to black, so is trans. So I would just say, what is not trans is what is cisgender.
And let's even maybe take a step further back. You, Jordan, have said a couple of words that I want to make sure that we all are clear on. Intersex. Okay. What's intersex?
Intersex is a person who is neither 100% male or 100% female, and that's due to the makeup of their chromosomes and hormones. It can be their primary and secondary sexual characteristics are not the same, or it can be based on ambiguous genitalia. So there are certain factors that make up who you are, your sex or your gender. So if all of them match, you're either male or female. And if one of those receptors don't match, then you are considered intersex. And I happen to be an intersex person, because my hormones, or I guess I'll explain further, because my hormones are female and my chromosomes are male.
So how, I really appreciate your sharing that and coming straight out the gate with that. And you are very open in your discussion around this. Has that in any way, how has that been a challenge, or what has that experience for you been like as a result of that?
Well, first of all, we've all know about LGBTQIA. So everyone had no idea what the I stood for. So once I got my intersex diagnosis about 8 years ago, at first I wasn't going to tell anyone because I didn't understand it myself. So I was going to take that on to glory with me when my time came, because I didn't, want anyone to know, because it was so rarely talked about. So after a couple of months, some friends of mine said, the Lord or the universe doesn't give you something that you can't handle. So why don't you tell your story? Because in telling your story and events like this, we help other people who may be listening. So I wrote an article in December 2011, the Vital Voice magazine, detailing what intersex was and how I found out. And since then, a lot of people that I know have gone and got the same test done, and they found out they were actually intersex as well. So I'm very open about it. I love talking about it because, education is a wonderful thing. Just like we're having this wonderful event tonight. We have to, through events like this and people opening and telling and sharing their stories, people learn. So the only challenge is people kid me and say, you're the only intersex person I know. I'm like, no, I'm not. There's 1.7 million of us out there. We're 2%. We're 2% of the world's population. So, and we're as common as redheads and twins. So, you know, I'm happy to be intersex. I am blessed to have this special power, as I say.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate, and that you're right. When you talk about the idea of having conversations like this, and it's only through having these conversations do our awareness increase, right, and our understanding. But there's another piece that you said that, you know, you're the first one that I know. In many ways, we don't know a lot about people, right? And we think that they're the first, right? Or that we don't know other trans individuals, you know, and you don't know, right? And I think about the fact that the Human Rights Community Foundation estimated that there were more than 2 million trans and gender non-conforming people in the United States. That's a lot of people, and you don't necessarily know. And that 1.4 million more than in 2016, right? So that number is increasing. We know the trans population is more racially and ethnically diverse than the general population. In one survey, it said that 55% identify as white and 16% identify as African-American or Black, right? So that's more than the population. 21% identify as Latino and Hispanic, and 8% identify as another race or ethnicity. Gabby, you live in the intersection of Black and being trans, the most marginalized of marginalized people. What do you need people to know about intersectionality?
The thing that I need people to know about intersectionality is the fact that, you know, when we think about it at its core, intersectionality is understanding that, you know, a person's gender, color, etc., you know, places or hinders them in life in certain ways, you know. And so that is ultimately what I need people to understand, especially when we're talking about my personal identity as a Black trans woman, you know, how that affects my life, things that I cannot do or things that I cannot obtain because of my identity, and things that, you know, surround that identity. And so that's what I need people to understand when I'm talking about intersectionality.
Do you have any thoughts on that one, Jordan?
Well, intersectionality to me, you know, one person can hold a whole bunch of intersectionalities within themselves. Like, for instance, I happen to be Black, white, Native American, male, female, intersex, trans. So I'm in my own right, in my own identities, I am intersectionality. So when people are spewing forth their negative thoughts from trans people, it's more than we're all connected somehow. So it's just through our intersectionality and understanding how we all are made up and how we all can work with one another, then that's how we figure out how to get through all this intersectionality and explain it to people. Because like I said, everyone, you can be so intersectional within yourself.
You know, one of the reasons I really wanted to have this show, is, you know, Gabby, and I say Gabby, I recognize it's Gabrielle, but I have known you for such a long time as Gabby, and I do apologize. But Gabrielle and Jordan, I've known as well for a long time. And so often, you know, we talk about being Black, right? We had this summer of racial reckoning, Black Lives Matter, 2014, you know, it was a huge piece for us. And this summer, however, I felt that so much, and Gabby, I follow you on your social media, and you did a lot of awareness building even for myself. You know, I've had you in my classes before, you've talked about your experiences and your transition, but this summer, it touched differently for me. And it touched differently because while I know that I was out like Black Lives Matter, right? There were so many Black trans women who were the victims of violence. And as a community, I felt that we had also gone silent in supporting that, even to the point of even my own need to recognize where I stood and how I showed up in allyship and in support of the two of you who I know personally, right? and it's all about these personal connections. And we need to also then be able to recognize this whole idea that we can be Black and trans. We can say Black Lives Matter and that Black trans lives matter, and that we must say that, right? And within our community, sometimes I don't think that, I know we don't show up as well for that.
Because one of the things, I spoke at several Black Lives Matter movements, and I brought up this. One time I said, look around at all the signs. How many signs out there say Black trans lives matter? All the signs said Black lives matter. And people were listing all the African Americans, all the Blacks that had been murdered by police. Not, I would say 98% of the signs did not have one Black trans woman on there, either had been, or a Black trans person who had been killed by police. So that makes me think, and we would always say at the rallies, all Black lives matter when Black trans lives matter. And we can't, you can't take the trans out of Black lives, because yes, we are Black trans women and our lives do matter. So in that movement, in the Black Lives Matter movement, we have to include trans people there, because we are Black lives. And sometimes that's hard for people to understand, especially when you're dealing with Black toxic masculinity, which we'll get into later. When Nina Pop right here in Sikeston, Missouri was killed, where was the outrage? Where was the protest? Where was the saying of her name? When all these 44 trans people, 84% of them being trans people of color, where was the outrage? Where was the protest? Where was the anger? That's what I'm talking about. Where was that emergence of taking to the streets and saying their names? So I'll just get off my soapbox right now, because that's.
I agree with Jordan. Unfortunately, there is a disconnect between the Black Lives Matter movement and then the Black Trans Lives Matter movement. But I think as we dive deeper and dig deeper into that, I think there's a lot of things that come to play. The Black cis community, especially the Black family, has strong issues with queerness, transness, and just being gay in general. And I think that a lot of that, the Black family, the structure of the Black family is very religious. At its core, it's very religious, and everything is based in religious values and thoughts and things like that. And so when you take a step back, I think that's really where the disconnect comes from. And so in a lot of the conversations that I have with Black men, cis Black men, especially and cis Black women, it's basically, that educational piece of, educating about intersectionality and educating on everyone is different. And, at the same time, we're Black people. I'm Black, just like Vincent is Black, just like Brian is Black, just like Jordan is Black. We're Black at the end of the day. And like you said, Jordan, our lives matter just as much as our cis Black counterparts as well. And we should be included, in the marches, in the sign holding, in the fights, but unfortunately we are left behind.
So I still want to sit around this conversation of us as Black folks in the Black community and still make some connections to the fact that the trans community, particularly my sisters, right, face a lot of social inequities, the same ways in which, to your point about Black Lives Matter and the social inequities that exist there. 39% of Black trans people live in poverty. 29% of them have no health insurance coverage, right, or are underinsured. 55% were unable to vote. 55% unable to vote due to a fear of facing discrimination at the polls. Considering all of this, what are some of the challenges that you face, that you personally face as trans women of color?
Jordan, I'll let you go first.
Okay, that's because I'm the oldest. No, well, a lot of the things that I faced, I can go off on a deep subject on this. Well, I'll just talk about my experience. Like when a Black man is interested in you, they will move mountains and oceans to get to you. But once you say these 3 words, instantly become a piece of dirt to them. And those 3 words are, I am transgender. You can go from being loved to being loathed in a matter of seconds. So when you wanted to get with me, I was honey, baby, angel, sweetie, let me take care of you. But when I said I'm transgender, then I became everything but a child of God, you know? And then sometimes I work a lot in the public. I work part-time at a gas station also. And if I don't do anything perfectly, the customers will say to me, well, you don't know anything because you're a man. You're not fooling me. And I'm like, I'm just a human trying to live my best life, and you have a great day. Because I'm not gonna let people steal my thunder or my sunshine by thinking they can hurt me by their words. And people think just because you're a Black trans woman, you're a second-class citizen, which comes from the man that used to lead this country. Because when you roll back protections against trans people and say trans people are not fit to serve in the military, then you automatically, as a leader of this country, have your followers think that we are second-class citizens. And they think, because they're listening and they might hear what he's saying differently, that gives you the right to hunt us and disrespect us and treat us like barnyard animals, which you think gives you the right to kill us because the man that leads this country say we aren't even fit to serve in our military, our armed forces, I should say. So that's how people come to, I feel like, discriminated against and always oppressed against because of what leaders say and how people viewed. And like what Gabrielle said, it comes from the structure of the Black family, you know, because in our Black community, we are taught to be strong, breadwinners, and don't ever let the man put you down. And somehow people think that because we're transitioning, we want to be less than humans.
Gabby, I want to come back to something you said, Jordan.
Okay.
What are some of your challenges?
My experiences as a Black trans woman, I will start off by saying that I speak to this often, Professor Flewellen, you've heard me talk about privilege. And I think that I am a Black trans woman of privilege in the sense of, especially when it comes to dating, and I'll start right off the bat with Jordan as we talk about like my love life and, you know, dating and like things like that for Black trans women especially. You know, yes, men do seek us out, and then, you know, like Jordan said, once they find out, you know, there's some turn off there. In my experience, a lot of, you know, my dating experiences have always been some form of fetishizing me. Mm-hmm. And me being this, and I make fun of, on my Instagram, you know, I call myself the unicorn, you know, and I do believe that men see us as like these mythical creatures, you know, that are toys to them, that, you know, sexually pleasing to them, you know, for their own vices and things that they want to experience. But it does not go further than that. You know, no man, not a lot of men do not want to date us in public, do not want to be open in a relationship with us, do not want to openly love us. And of course, you know, when that happens, that brings upon a lot of mental issues for you. You begin to question yourself. You begin to question your value. You know, am I worth it? You know, will I ever find love? And, you know, from talking to Black trans siblings of mine, you know, unfortunately, that is a thought that a lot of us have. You know, will we ever have leading lives of, you know, walking down an aisle and getting married if you want to do that? Will we ever have a family to build with, you know? And, you know, you look at media, there's just not a lot of trans women that are in happy, healthy relationships. Even some of our most prestigious Black trans women that are on the screens, you know, don't have, you know, longevity in relationships. And so that's one of the things that, you know, I've dealt with and have been dealing with. And then as far as work, you know, I've been transitioning now for a little over 2 years. My background was in healthcare for 9 years. And it was very difficult for me when I came out within that institution as a trans woman. I felt that my superiors, who were mostly all male, did not respect me. any longer. I lost certain privileges that I had of management, that I was giving to the departments and things like that. It was very difficult, and it brought a lot of mental stress to me. And I actually had to leave healthcare, and that was one of the reasons why I left. I just was unhappy, and I found solace and just happiness in, doing the work and educating institutions and businesses here in St. Louis, and working with people, especially the cisgender community, especially. So, they could understand, what it is really like for trans people, but specifically a Black trans woman, just out here trying to live life.
At what point do you, and this was the point I wanted to raise with you, Jordan, as a follow-up, but Gabrielle also touched upon it. So it's this whole idea in terms of relationships, right? And trying to have those intimate personal relationships. At what point do you share that information with a potential partner or someone of interest? And do you think that that is your responsibility, or how much of that is your responsibility at what point in time?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
For me, especially, I will say a lot of men, I'm very open. Professor, that I'm very open on my social media about my identity and who I am. So it makes it a little difficult for me for people not to know. I think most men that slide into my DMs, for lack of a better term, typically know what they're getting into. But as far as going out to bars and being out in public spaces, for me, and it's different across the board, for me, I find that it is very important to, tell that gentleman who I meet right off the bat. I may not tell him right there in person, but if we exchange numbers, maybe later that night, I'll say, hey, it was lovely meeting you, lovely speaking with you. Thank you, for whatever. Just so you know, I am trans. And I give them that space to make the decision on, if they want to move forward or not. And I think I do that out of safety.
Ooh.
I also do that. It depends on where I give you my number, to be honestly. Sometimes when I work at the station, I give men sliding me their numbers. And usually I tell right off the bat, because child, I am 6'4". If you can't tell just by looking at me, and I know there's some tall Black women out there, but I'm like, oh, okay, if you can't tell, then all right. So then I always wait until I get home. And then when we're having a phone conversation, that's the first thing off the bat. So just so you know, I am transgender. So I do it at home because that's a place of safety. Now, if you meet me at the bar, I'll do it at the bar because we're out in public and there's protection out there. And as everyone, if you know me, I will fight. You know me, I will twirl you in a minute. So, and then sometimes I have to remind them, you fitting to hit a woman, but I used to be a man, so it's okay. You don't think this will be the first fight I ever had? No, it's not, because I've been fighting all my life. So you can come on. Then I try to throw a little humor in there, and I said, and then you got to tell your friends you got beat up by a girl. How's that gonna look? So just think about that before you throw the first punch. So it's from a safety point. Like we talked about, you have to take in consideration your situation, where you are, and how are you going to get out of this situation if it turns ugly. And most of the time, I never, ever get in a car or invite them to my house without telling them first, because that can be disastrous sometimes. And that's what I try to tell my trans siblings is be upfront. Yes, it may hurt and you may like him, but in the long run, it's for safety. It's for your safety that, you have to tell them upfront.
So safety is a huge piece that you all are constantly thinking about. And I think it was you, Gabrielle, who talked about this whole idea of your work experience and just the toll. So how do you also then deal with the mental piece of this and your mental stability? And while you all prepare to answer that, Brian, I'm gonna ask if you prepare to come up with a question from the audience. Go ahead, though.
The way that honestly, my mental health was deteriorating for quite some time. And I'll be open and honest and transparent. Professor, that's usually how I am. But I recently, started medication for anxiety and depression that I was facing around my identity and around the things that came along with my identity. And I've gone through a couple different medications to kind of, monitor that or make those feelings, go away in a sense. I don't think they ever really go away, but I can suppress them with medicine. And I think also surrounding myself with people that value me, that respect me, hold me in high regards, and genuinely care, has been important, very vital in my the stability of my mental health and how that gets better. So that's how I have been dealing with it. And, therapy here and there.
Thank you. Jordan?
And look, I'm an old lady. I'm 60. I don't give a flip if you like me or not. Okay? I'm here living my best life. It took me a long time to get comfortable in my own skin. So I'm happy with who I am. If you want to be with me, you can be with me. If you don't, you don't. That is your loss. Because the sun is still going to set and it's going to rise the next day, and Jordan Elizabeth Braxton is still going to go on with her day. So, I just have that positive outlook, and I try to surround myself with positive thinking people, because I don't always want to be the Debbie Downer of the group. I always like to be the positive influence. And Gabrielle and I hang out a lot. She's actually my daughter. So we hang out a lot and we talk about how we feel and how different situations make us feel. And I always try to be a positive influence to the younger trans generation, because I come from a place of love and safety. Because look, back in the 70s and 80s, if you were not passable, I know that's not a in vogue word at this time, you did not get to hang out with other trans girls because of fear of getting attacked or beat up or ridiculed out in public. So my place comes from a place of love.
Jordan, you said if you were not a what, you didn't get to, will you say that again? I missed that.
You weren't passable. I'm sorry.
Passable.
Yes. Yes. Because one thing I want to say up front is that not all trans people look like me. And Gabrielle talked about it earlier about passing privilege. I always get accused when I talk to Black trans girls because they say I have double passing privilege. So, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I haven't had the same struggles that other trans girls have. My transition and coming out to family, to work, socially, medically, everything has been a breeze. I haven't had any difficulty. Let me tell you how I transitioned at work. I say this all the time. I left as Leon, came back as Lee. No asking of HR. There was no permission from anybody. I just did it. And no one, guess what happened? No one at work said a thing.
It's lovely.
It's lovely. So what I say to people is just live your life and be happy. And surround yourself with a wonderful support system. Because being trans, especially a Black trans woman, can just be so draining at times. And Lord, yes, I've sat in this apartment and rocked myself like Sophia and cried about it. But at the end of the day, I still gotta go out, earn a living, and do what I have to do. And what I tell people is every day that you get up and you walk out that door, you are not being what society wants you to be. You are being an activist and standing up for yourself. So, and earlier we talked about how trans people live in poverty and how trans people don't have health care. I work at an institution right now where we're trying to be that health home for trans people. We're working on getting some medical resources for trans people so they can come and get tested. I do a lot of testing for HIV and STDs. And I want my trans siblings to come and at least get tested. And whatever the result is, we can go from there. But at least come and get tested so that you know what your status is. And I can help you have the healthiest sex life that you can. Because basically that's my job, is to talk about sex all day. Because your sexual health is very important.
Sure. I like that you said just by going out, leaving your home, you were being an activist, right? You are putting yourselves out there, putting your body literally out there. In many of the same ways as activists go and put, I talk about, I put my body out in the street. I use my voice out in the street. That whole piece right there was fantastic. Thank you. Brian, do you have a question from the audience?
Yes, actually, we do have a question from Twitter. This question is for both Gabrielle and Jordan. What changes do you hope to see for Black trans lives with this new administration?
Well, we've seen some of the things already, is that President Biden has overturned some of the, for instance, some of the regulations that were taken that the former person that held that office wrote against, did executive orders against us. First thing he did is he lifted the ban on trans people serving in the military. There's also been executive orders about LGBTQI rights being reinstated, and policies and procedures that protect us for being trans and for being LGBTQIA. So those are positive steps we've seen already in this 1 week of President Biden's presidency, which I'm very grateful for, and I hope and pray that we'll continue on this progressive step, because I think I read somewhere that he's looking to start an LGBTQIA task force to advisory board so he can further help our community. So it's things like that that helps me think that it's going to be a better day for trans people coming forward, because every day, I just posted another one today on my Facebook page about, it was in Iowa, that there's another anti-trans bill being introduced in the Iowa Senate. And there was one in Hawaii, there was one in Utah. It's like every week in a different state, there's an anti-trans bill introduced. And that wanes on the mental health issues that are in our community, because the constant barrage of legislation is sometimes overbearing. So we, as trans people, we need to get out and vote, and we need to vote, have our voices be heard. So we know that get these politicians out of office. And yes, I know that's hard to do, because there are some trans people, like you said before, Vincent, that are afraid to vote because of discrimination. And we as leaders and activists need to make sure that those barriers and blockades from trans people voting are torn down so our voices can be heard, not only in the street, but in the voting booth as well.
I think that I want to see, and like Jordan said, I think that, Biden, as soon as he got in office, is like running, feet to the ground quickly to do things for the community. What I am hoping to see, though, is expanded healthcare for trans people and our needs as far as healthcare is concerned. As I know, there are only 2 insurance providers now that actually will cover the cost of, surgeries for trans people. I, and Vincent knows this, I am currently on my journey to get gender affirming surgery. And again, even in my privilege and, just the hoops and the hurdles that we have to jump through to get gender affirming surgery, even for some trans people to even start hormone therapy, they have to jump through fiery hoops. And it just creates this environment of just unhealthiness. I could not imagine, and again, it is a privilege of mine, but I could not imagine, feeling away and like feeling trans and then, telling my provider this, but then not being able to get the medication that I need to medically transition. And let me say that not everyone wants to medically transition. Not every trans person wants to. But I hope that as we move forward with Biden in office, that, he expands healthcare to meet our needs, because there are a lot of needs that we have, as far as like mental health and access to therapy that should be easy, but that is not. It's so expensive. And if you don't have insurance, you can't afford those things. And that's a problem.
And also, to piggyback off of what Gabby said, is that when we're looking for employment, we need to take into consideration those benefits that we get, healthcare benefits. If I work for this company, is my hormone therapy going to be covered? Is my gender affirming surgery going to be covered? Just to be transparent, I too have started my process for my gender affirming surgery. Actually, Gabby and I had appointments on the same day, just a few hours apart. So it's things like that, and I consider myself knowledgeable about the healthcare system and how to navigate those. But sometimes I feel like like where I work, we have PrEP navigators, and we have people that help you navigate through that. Sometimes I think we need to have transitional navigators to help people get through the hoops and hurdles and high jumps that they need to at least start their transitioning, because sometimes people just get overwhelmed by the forms they have to fill out, some of the questions they ask on the form, and some of the questions they ask you when you go for your first consultation for your gender affirming surgery. Some of those questions may be invasive to some people, but you need to say, hey, these are things that people need so you can start. I know it's difficult. I know it can be very anxiety ridden, but come on, we can do this together, and just be there to support and reassure people that the process. So I think we need to have transition navigators out there.
I like the concept and sense that you all are presenting in terms of community building, right? And, Gabrielle, I've heard you say your trans siblings, right? I've heard you refer to Jordan as your mother, right? And it's this whole idea of building your own community of support. And what I think I'm hearing you say, Jordan, is to make that more broad and to put it into place so that folks can have that support throughout their process. Mm-hmm. Brian, is there another question out there?
We have another question from Twitter. Going back to the Biden administration, Biden appointed a trans woman to Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Rochelle Levine. Is that a victory for you? Jordan, I think that question is directed towards you.
Okay. Yes, I see it as a victory, because now we have someone that can hopefully advocate for what we need in healthcare. Like Gabby said, there are certain things that we need for our surgeries, top and bottom. Male and female trans people have to have surgeries, and hopefully she will be able to help us get those surgeries or get legislation so insurance companies won't think that it's cosmetic, that it's actually a needed surgery. Because some people think bottom surgery is a way to relieve their mental anguish, and people say, well, you just want that because you want it. I'm like, no, I want it because A, that's my end goal, and B, it'll help me feel a little more complete, So hopefully she will be able to help Biden construct and get out there and put policies and procedures together that will aid our community with all our medical needs, and not including just transition stuff, but a lot of us suffer from comorbidities, other healthcare issues that we need to take care of. I think the 2015 trans survey said that maybe 44% of trans people don't have healthcare because of experience they've had with their providers. And as a person that works with the public, I work with a lot of providers to give education about trans people. I had a relationship with Goldfarb School of Nursing and with St. Louis Community College, where I go and I speak to nursing students about what it is to be intersex and what it is to be trans. So at least they've heard the terms when they run across those people.
Thank you. I just saw that we have some questions pop up in our Q&A. And this one, hi everyone, love this discussion. How can cisgender Black women be a better ally to trans women?
You want to go ahead and start?
No, I'm just going to say that I think that number one, at the top of the priority and at its core, I think that Black cis women have to learn to see trans women as women.
Bingo, exactly.
And that's really ultimately, you know, what it is. When we talk about allyship from Black cis women, especially, you know, we can do, and we've heard this before, like we can do your hair, we can do your makeup, you can be friends with us. But the minute that, and from my own experience, the minute that, you know, a Black cis woman feels threatened or imposed on by a trans woman, then we become men and all these other things. You know, I really had to take a step back and not follow, you know, like the shade room and things like that. Because, you know, you see so many negative comments about not only just gay Black men, but also just trans women from Black cis women. And so I think once we, you know, move to a place of where Black cis women just see us as fellow women that, you know, are striving and wanting the same things as women, you know, that can create that bridge between that gap that we have, or the connection that we have.
Right. And I'll second that, because I've had experience when I'm just minding my own business, doing my job, and a Black cis woman will say, well, you know, that's a man over there. I don't know who she thinks she's trying to fool. And I'll be like, I'm just up here doing my job. I ain't said diddly squat to you. I ain't said 2 words to you. And now you just calling me out like that for no reason. And I haven't said anything to you. I'm just over here, again, living my best life. So just, you know, and sometimes I ask them, well, why are you talking? Like, for instance, when a woman asked me one day, well, you're a man. I asked her, are you? And she got offended. She's like, how dare you ask me that? I said, well, how dare you ask me that? Now you know how I feel when you ask me that. How you like that shoe on the other foot. She's like, well, I'm gonna report you to your manager, you're being rude. And a white man behind me said, no, she's not being rude. She's being correct. That's insulting. Now you need to apologize to her. So, you know, and then that kind of allyship we need from our Black from our Black cis sisters. You know, like Gabby said, they need to first see us as Black women and not as a threat to whatever man that they are interested in.
Yeah.
So let me kind of pivot slightly, but I think still kind of in this general same concept of allyship, right? And so when we think about the roles in which Black and brown trans people played during Stonewall, right? The Stonewall riots, which started, you know, the modern LGBT movement. You both have been critical, though, of the LGBT community. And so I'd like for us to spend some time talking about the why. Why?
Well, let me start first, because I wrote an op-ed about this. I'm very critical of the cis white gay men, because I wrote this op-ed from a very personal standpoint, because when you needed me, I should say, for to raise money and help fight against HIV and AIDS, I was there. When you needed me for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I was there. When you needed money to go to the bus to Washington, D.C. to do the March on Washington for marriage equality, I was there. Every time you needed me and asked me to do something, I was there unconditionally without question. So now that you got everything that you need to make your human rights possible, I need you, your support and your privilege and your vote and your voice to get me the things that I need, because you are leaving me behind. And how dare you leave me behind after I was there helping you get what you need? And I know a lot of my cis gay white friends will say, I don't know exactly what you need because I don't want to say anything because I don't want you to think that I'm overstepping my bounds. I said, but your silence is just as deadly as you doing the wrong thing. If you step out of bounds or I think you're not in your place, sweetie, I will let you know. But first make that effort to say something about it. Don't let me think that you don't care about your silence. Because I need, like I said, I need your privilege to get legislation that we need healthcare, all the things that we need. Your votes count. And if you just said to me, hey, Jordan, I value you as a Black trans woman, that would make my day. You know, simple things like that. Thank you for what you do. Thank you what you did for us. How can we help you attain your human rights? Because trans rights are human rights. and also trans rights or women's rights. Because sometimes when we talk about women's rights, we want to leave trans women out, and that's not cool.
Jordan, I'm very critical of the cis gay community. And yes, more so towards cis white gay men, especially. And like when we think about the Stonewall riots, and you think about Martha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, you know, those women were not only fighting for their rights as trans women, but they were also fighting for gay rights. And, you know, a lot of the people that benefited from that fight, of course, were cis gay white men. And, you know, it's just like Jordan said, Black trans women are at the forefront of every single movement. Typically, you know, all the time, we are at the forefront of every movement. Black Lives Matter, marriage equality, things like that, you know. But when it is time for someone to show up for us, our own community does not show up for us. And there is, for whatever reason, a disconnect, you know. And I think that, you know, people can sit here and say, well, I don't know what you need. Well, I don't accept that answer, because you can look on social media, you can look at the news, and you can speak to someone personally, and you should know what that person needs, you know? So the whole rhetoric of like, oh, I don't know what you need as a Black trans woman, that does not equate to me. Something's missing and something's not clicking, you know? So yeah, so I'm very critical of them, and I hold cis gay white men and cis gay men in general accountable for the lack of understanding and the lack of work that they do to be there for us and to support us and uplift us.
They can ask. They can just simply ask.
Right. And Lord knows I made a lot of money off the gay community being an entertainer, but but I need that money turned into power,
movement,
support.
Yeah.
You know, you support me with your dollars, but I need you to support me, like I say, with your vote and your voice.
Well, the other part of that too, I'll make this really quick. I think that too, when you think about it, in a lot of ways, I think that the gay community sees trans women and drag performers simply as entertainment. And they keep us in that box. You know, as you know, they love us because either we're pretty and like we come out and we all dressed up and glammed up and our bodies look great, or either you're a performer and like, you know, you're shimmying on stage and, you know, they can come out and see that and they love that and they ooh and ah. But beyond that, they don't want anything to do with us, you know, and that is the sad reality.
Thank you. So time always flies by, right? I want to bring up the chancellor for her closing comments and reflections, but if it's possible, there are a couple of questions that have come in, and one of which I think is particularly, I would love to get your take on, Jordan. There's some advice that someone is asking about a 15-year-old child and what should a parent say to
okay. I'm here until the last question's answered, baby.
Wonderful, thank you. Please welcome Chancellor Strobel.
Well, thank you, Vincent. And Brian, welcome to your first time to moderate this program. You're off to a great start, and we're so glad you're with us at Webster. Jordan and Gabrielle, I am so grateful to you. We said at the beginning of this program, this is to educate. This is to help us have honest and thoughtful academic discourse about topics in the DEI space that many listeners, I'm sure, have only the littlest bit of understanding. And your willingness to tell us about your lived experiences, your identities, the struggles, and what it is that really all of us can do to be part of a journey that I've often described, no matter what the DEI topic is that we're talking about, is that all of us as individuals have a habit of kind of how far out from ourselves and our own understanding of our identity that we kind of draw the circle. And some people draw it really very close to themselves. And their understanding of what is kind of an okay or an acceptable or an understandable identity is their own. and anybody that is very much like them. And to be real, a lot of us maybe don't even truly understand our own identity. And it changes and it deepens and it broadens over time. But understanding really is improved through education, I'm convinced. And you've helped us there. But then beyond understanding, that line has to include, in my view, accepting, affirming, embracing, and creating, Jordan, what I know you've talked about when we first signed on, belonging. And that we see everyone with whom we interact as a fellow human being and a valued and worthy member of the human community, just like we see that about ourselves. That is far from where the reality is. And you know that. And all of us that are looking at each other today on the screen know that. But it is the goal. And Vincent and Brian and many of us at Webster are trying to expand that rich and deep understanding of the great diversity that makes the human community strong. And to see that diversity of identity and lived experience as a strength and not something to be abused or at its worst killed.
Right.
So it's a serious topic. It's a serious topic to talk, Vincent, about how sexuality and identities around sexuality intersect with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this has been a fascinating conversation and one that I hope deepens all of our commitment to a shared humanity more fully. So thank you.
As always, Chancellor, thank you for your great words and wisdom, and obviously your support and commitment to the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion as the leader of the university. Thanks for your continued partnership. And now I'd like to also let you all know that Webster Speaks will return on March 31st with a look at race in higher education, focusing on the importance of historically Black colleges and universities, the aftermath of the 2020 elections as it relates to race. Remember that you can watch all previous episodes of the show at webster.edu/Webster Speaks. And I also want to ask that you save the date, February 23rd through the 25th, as Webster University will host our annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference, which Chancellor Strobel and my predecessor started 6 years ago. This time, it will be virtual. We have an exciting lineup of presentations that will challenge the way we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have two outstanding keynote speakers, Patrice Cullors, who is an activist, an artist, and a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, and Charlotte Clymer, who is a military vet, a transgender activist, and former press secretary at the Human Rights Campaign. Watch your inboxes or go to webster.edu/conversations to keep up with the development on what will be an amazing event. And then I also have to give a shout out for my Webster World Report. The next edition of Webster World Report will feature Chancellor Strobel discussing her work with the African Renaissance Diaspora Network, also known as ARDN, and will also feature a perspective on global citizenship from Webster students studying at our Geneva campus. The program will be available online January 29th. January 29th. Thank you all. Those of you who are able to and are interested in sticking around, our guests have said that they will remain available. There are some fantastic questions here that I certainly want to get asked because, as Chancellor Strobel said, this is about education. This is a great opportunity for us to inform and educate those who are willing to listen and to learn. So those of you who have to log off, I certainly understand. Good night. I hope to see you all at our Diversity and Inclusion Conference. If not then, I look forward to seeing you all in March. Thank you. There's a question right here that I know is for you, Jordan. What sort of advice would you give a 15-year-old intersex child to make their experience going forward in community easier? What practical steps can they take now? From your previous experience, any tips, and how can a parent support them?
Okay. Oh, that's a great question. What I try to tell the youth that contact me about being intersex is just, A, believe in yourself. Believe how wonderful and special that you are. Follow your own passion and your own dreams. Listen to what your heart tells you and go towards that, whatever you want to be. What I tell parents is, A, let the teenager, your child, decide what they want to be. Let them pick their gender. Don't pick them for them. Recently, this hasn't been announced yet, so I'm gonna give y'all some scoop. I just joined the board of Transparent USA. So, oh, look at you. Look at my daughter. Yes, supporting her mother, Transparent USA. I just joined the board of Transparent USA because as an older trans person who happens to be intersex, I think there needs to be, again, we're talking about intersectionality. There is a great intersectionality between being intersex and being trans. But I joke around and say, when I do a stand-up, that being intersex is like the first cousin of being trans. You know, we're all related and we're all here, but we're like one step away from being trans. So as a part of Transparent and as a community leader, I always tell parents, let the child decide. Yes, don't make it all about what I'm going to tell the PTA, what I'm going to tell other family members. Just tell them this is your child and you love your child and you support your child in whatever the decisions they make. So that's very important to show that family support. And, you know, if your child wants to put on a dress, if your child wants to put on some pants, let them. If they want to run around in a princess costume, let them. Never squelch that identity, because what you squelch now will be harmful later. You know, just love and support the child and take them to doctor's appointments and be very interactive with their care. But most of all, love them, because that is your child. Come hook nor crook or whatever, they're your child and they need your love and support, because God knows when they go to school and they go out in the world, it may not be like that. And it's nobody's business what your child has, but their own and their parents. So I would just say, just give that child a lot of love and support and tell them that they're special and that they are unique and they're wonderful, and just shower them with love.
Thank you. Gabrielle, this question is for you. What are some things medical providers may say or do that aren't trans friendly, but may not be intentional? As a cis female and medical provider, though I think I'm aware, I know I can't know everything you have experienced.
Some things that providers do, you know, I think that as we move, me and my partner talk about this quite often. We talk about especially the importance of pronouns. And the feeling of like when you walk into a provider's office and they greet you with, you know, like, well, what are your pronouns? You know, regardless of how I may look exterior wise, my pronouns could be different. That's just the reality. And so I think for providers, using that as an icebreaker and letting, you know, your patient know, especially like a trans patient, know that, you know, for lack of a better term, that you're, you know, down for the cause and, you know, down, and that they can feel safe with you. I think that's really important. And as a provider, I'm sure that, you know, that this provider probably, I'm assuming that they are seeing trans patients. Is that?
It doesn't say, but my guess is that I think I sense that in the question, yes.
That they're coming across some trans patients. Like I said, using that as an icebreaker and just being, you know, understanding and also being knowledgeable. And if you have to, you know, do some reading to become knowledgeable, do that. If there is something, you know, one of the things that I will say when I started my trans journey that I really respected my then primary care physician for is the fact that she told me, she was like, this is something that I am not versed in. And so I'm going to refer you to someone who is. And you can allow that person to take over, your care fully, or, you can see that person and then stay with me for your primary care. So just being open and honest, and just being supportive of that patient, the same way that you would with any other patient.
Brian, you have a question out there?
Yes, this question is from the Q&A. Jordan, as you help mentor your younger sister, what is one of the biggest changes you have seen compared to when you started your transition?
What are some of the major changes that I've seen?
Yes.
In myself or just in society, maybe?
In yourself when you started your transition.
Oh, okay, well, my transition was not like everyone else's. First of all, everyone's transitional journey, not like when Chancellor Strobel, is that what she said, her name, Strobel, said it's a journey. Every transition is a journey and every journey is different. I, being intersex, we jokingly say, already halfway there. One thing I will let everyone know is my body hasn't produced testosterone in years. So I didn't have to take blockers to block testosterone. I didn't have to do a lot of things that other trans women had to do. From the second I took my first dose of estrogen, things changed. I mean, facially, this was all the same. Even as my former male self, I looked exactly the same. I was always mistaken as a girl, as a female, even when I thought I was having my butchest of days. I always got, called a Black lesbian or a white lesbian. So, it was the transition was facially was not that different. However, within 6 to 8 months after I started my transition, I developed breast, hips, and booty. And let me tell you, sometimes as your body changes, your hip changes and your structure becomes more female, your hips will kill you because they are tilting forward to get that female structure. And those are the things that I share with people. And I tell people, just enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey. Every day, look at yourself. I'm gonna say this, get naked and look at yourself in the mirror and appreciate what is happening to your body. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of body shaming and a lot of gender policing that goes on when you're transitioning. And whatever your end game is, whatever you want yourself to look like, you may not want to look like me and Gabby, and that's cool, that's you. You be you. Be the best you can be. But be a proud you. Don't let anyone ever shame you and ridicule you. And you stand up and you say proud, I am transgender. So that's what I usually tell my young sisters is be proud of who you are. Hold your chest up, your breast up high and smile and say, I am transgender.
Good advice there. I think that Gabrielle, this is the clarification. So our questioner earlier says, yes, I see many patients in the community, including trans patients, and I have pics in my exam room of myself and my own girls at Pride to hopefully allow patients to feel more comfortable, but I don't address pronouns, but will now.
Good. Yeah, and I like I said, I think that is, like I said, an icebreaker, and I think it's good. The pictures that you support Pride and that you're even open to as a physician seeing trans patients, So, I mean, just continue to create those relationships with those patients. And if there are certain things, one of the things too that I like, if a provider does not know something, letting me know that they will reach out to get the answer that I need, that shows that provider cares and, cares about me and my well-being instead of just prescribing me whatever or just writing it off.
And also providers, we will come out, Gabby and myself will come out and talk to you. Yeah, we will talk to you about how to talk to trans patients and give you stuff, because I go out and I do a lot of lectures to organizations, business schools around St. Louis about diversity, inclusion, and belonging and just what it means to be intersex and trans.
So that's another question, and I think this is good. We will post this up on the after, or actually in tomorrow's email, there will be a list of resources. And if you all are fine with this, I'd like for you all to maybe provide your personal contact information, because folks, in fact, are asking how they can get either of you all to speak at an event or to speak to groups with whom they work.
Okay.
And so if you all would provide that information, we'll get that in our thank you email. We send out an email tomorrow that thanks folks who did tune in tonight, and we'll have that listed as a resource. But if you want to say it now while they're here, in case.
I will give you, Professor, I'll give you, like, my email, my social, and then my link tree for resources, that I have listed and things like that to share in that tomorrow.
All right, good deal. Thank you. I did want to ask you all this question, and that is, and you've hinted to this a couple of times, Jordan. You all are coming from two different generations, right? How would you say your view of being trans and transgender acceptance is different as a result?
Well, like I said before, back in the 70s and 80s, you had to be passable to be trans. And that's changed as the definition or the umbrella of what trans means grew. And sometimes I have to catch myself from being a gender police woman, because I have to sometimes catch myself and think, okay, not everyone wants to look like you. Not everyone wants to go and have bottom surgery. Maybe the fact that they say they're trans and they still have a beard is fine. As good as, there's such thing as gender nonconforming trans people. So, sometimes people have to understand that not all trans people look like me. And it was hard for me to get to that place, because I was raised as if you didn't pass, you didn't belong. You couldn't call yourself trans. They just called you a boy in a wig. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough conversation, but that's the truth of it all. If you pass, you did not get to hang out with trans girls or trans boys and trans girls, because they didn't want to get jumped on, ridiculed, attacked and stuff. So like I said, if you didn't pass, you did not get to hang out. And they would tell you in not so kind of words. So, and that's how I changed. I had to look within myself and get rid of my own unconscious biasness against trans people who necessarily did not want to look like me. And that's hard to do when it comes from a place of love and security and want to make sure that you're not hurt. That's the mother instinct in me. And I've had to learn how not to put my notions or thoughts and feelings onto other people and accept trans people the way they are.
I think to answer that question too, I think that activism has changed in a bit. I always refer to, the younger generation, and my generation now is like young blood, right? And I think that, we're very much so like in your face. We are here. We're not going anywhere. You're going to see us. And it's just like there, And I almost feel like kind of euphoric about it, because it takes me back to like the pictures and the videos that I saw of, like the Sylvia Riveras and the Martha P. Johnsons that were like out there, like just really in the streets. And of course, I'm not like, one of the girls that are out in the streets, like at every protest. And I think a lot of that also has to deal with my privilege and the way that I approach my activism. But looking at my sisters that are around the same age as me across the US, and how they approach activism and making our voices heard is very empowering and inspiring. And I love that we're getting back to that place of, shaking the table, basically. And, letting people know that we're here, we're not going anywhere. You're going to hear us and you're going to see us. And that goes for even our community as well. I'm all about shaking the community table.
And I just put it out there, I'm always in the streets.
Yeah, she.
Like Gabby and the younger girls like, girl, mama, will you sit down sometime? I'm like, no, baby, I got to go out there. And recently there was we had a protest against a restaurant here, and people jokingly sent me messages that said, girl, we knew it was serious when we saw your old ass out there on the street. I have marched. I marched in 68. I'll march in 2021. So, I'm always out there, making sure we're represented, making sure that our trans rights are heard.
I want to ask you, Jordan, I first met you at Dieta Pepsi.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Who is Dieta Pepsi? Where is Dieta Pepsi today?
Okay, well, she's still around. However, to be perfectly honest, and people are shocked when I say this, I don't care if I don't do another drag show as long as I live.
Why is that?
This is why. Because Dieta was the safety net to become Jordan.
Ooh.
It allowed me to put on a dress and makeup and wig and be the entertainer that I always wanted to be, and be, Lord knows, I'm a beauty queen. I've won every title in the state of Missouri. It allowed me to fulfill that female part of me without coming out and saying, I am transgender, I want to transition. Like a lot of time I would tell my friends, child, if I was only 125 and 5'7", I would have had my surgery by now. Because I've never ever felt masculine. I was a cheerleader in high school. I started the very first male squad at our school, which they still have today. And I always wanted to wear the pleated skirts. I wanted to be the pom-pom girl. I didn't want to play football or basketball, even though I could outshoot anybody on a basketball court. I still wanted to do girl things, So Diet is still around. She allowed me, she was part of the journey, and yes, I still sometimes get that inkling, that itch to perform, but sometimes I just want to perform as me. Like one of my goals is to actually run, there's a pageant called Miss Senior Missouri, which is for cisgender women, and I want to run in that. Once I get all my paperwork in line, I want to actually run for Miss Senior Missouri and actually win a cisgender pageant. Because I can do it. So, that's one of my goals. So, that Dieta has not gone. She's just taking she's taking a little break while Jordan flourishes and people get to know her. Trust me, she'll be back this summer because that itch will have to be scratched, and I'll need, to get out there and perform. But she's taking a little rest.
I love hearing that, right? Like she was the way in which that part of that journey that led you to who you are today. And I wonder how many of us as fans, right, knew that story or knew that was kind of a mask, literally a mask. You were wearing a mask, right? And we talk about that so often. As a gay man, right? Like for a long time, I too wore a mask. I have friends, a couple of them, they are texting me. I know that they're listening here, but boy, why you gotta always tell everybody you gay, right? For me to do that today is because so many times in my past, I hid that fact and I hid that from myself even, right? And denied that of myself. And so each time I have that opportunity, I share it. Because also, it's about me, right? And it's my acknowledging who I am for the times in which I may not have done so. But B, is also trying to create room and space for the other younger Vincent that might be out there, right? Who can then, because I didn't see positive Black gay men images. I didn't see them, right? You were fags or you were a sissy, all these derogatory terms that were used against me. Right?
Oh, you're queer.
And I hate that word queer. We can talk about that one too. I hate the word queer. But yes, and that's why I hate the word queer. It's back to that very point, right? That was a word that was used to hurt. And I don't understand this concept of buying into these negative words to quote unquote reclaim them, right?
Right.
And I'm gonna take this a step further and say, you know, you all talked about the issue with cis white gay men, right? I too have an issue often with cis white gay men too, because this whole idea of privilege and their white male privilege. They forget that they carry that white male privilege card all of the time, all of the time. Right? And I get that they're gay, and I would never say that you have to hide your gay identity. I just talked about wanting to always own my gay identity. And so, but it is a privilege of theirs because when necessary, they can hide that gay identity. If it's around security and safety, what we were just talking about earlier, Jordan, they can hide that. I can never hide this blackness. Right. I might be able to hide my gayness, but I can't hide this blackness. Right. And with this blackness comes the use of other words used against me that were violently used against me and folks who look like me. Right. That I think there's a disconnect of how words are associated with violence that I don't think white cis gay folks understand. In that regard. I think also you mentioned this whole piece around gay marriage. I wished that instead of this push for gay marriage, I wish that there had been a push for a constitutional recognition of LGBT community, right? Because we would have then been protected. We would no longer have a conversation about whether either of you could go use which restroom you want to use, right? Whether, you know, we can go get married at 10 o'clock now, go to work and claim or change your papers at work with your partner now listed as your spouse and get fired. You can then go at 2 o'clock and change your lease, right, to now include your husband and get evicted, right? There are no full protections on that, right? But again, I believe that there was a movement that was really led by white folks, white gay folks, who didn't have that whole perspective and kind of and lens of looking at race and how if you take care of one, you can take care of all. And all they saw was their ability to get married.
Right. And I think, Vincent, what we saw and what we bought into is the one for all for one. Like when I supported, I thought, okay, this is going to benefit me. First of all, I never thought about marriage but I wanted my friends to be able to be married, you know? So I marched and I fought and I protested and I voted and called my legislators so that my friends could get married. However, just like you said, I never thought about discrimination in housing and jobs and healthcare and all that stuff. Maybe we should have done a wraparound kind of legislation to protect everyone. And that, I think that part of it, we bought into it thinking, well, once we get this done, they will come and help us. And that has not happened so far. And I think, and I don't want to sound like I'm hating on cis gay white men, because Lord knows I love y'all. Right. But sometimes I just need y'all to speak up and say something and be part of the protest. I want y'all to come to the Trans Memorial Garden on T-Door and hold a candle. You know, I want you to be there. If you can't say anything, let your actions speak volumes. You know, it's okay if you paint a trans flag on the bar, but you know what? Support those trans people when they come to your bar. You know, tell your patrons to treat the trans people right when they come to the bar. Don't turn the nose up at them like they're some alien or something, because why did you paint that trans flag on your bar when you don't really mean it, you know? So it's those kind of things that sometimes I say tick me off about our community, is that we need to, my fight as a trans woman is not just a passing fad or something convenient. It's my daily struggle. And I need you as a cis gay white man to help me, because sometimes I get tired. And I need you there to lift me up and walk with me and fight with me and be an ally. It's allyship. It's basically what we're talking about. I need you to be an ally to the trans community, especially the Black trans community.
Yeah. What were you saying, Gabrielle?
Performative. I think a lot of the things that they do, the gay community in general, is performative. I'm not a fan of performative allyship. I'm not a fan of performative activism, and that is what they typically, show up for. Like Jordan was speaking to, painting, Black Trans Lives Matter flags on your bar, but half of, the trans community does not feel safe in your bar or cannot come to your bar. That's a problem. And we have to look at the deeper picture of it, of who's really at fault here, So
you got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yeah.
You've got to, when you do things, what have you done to reach out to the trans community or the Black community in that matter? Why every time I go in there, it's the same cisgender white men that are there day after day, but yet I don't see people of color. I don't see trans people. I don't see trans people of color. But yet you want to fly the trans flag on your bar as to appear that you're welcoming.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's that piece. There are some commonalities, right? So we talk about Black Lives Matter, we talk about Black Trans Lives Matter, right? And I think what both of you have touched upon is the issue that some of my past guests and some of our past shows have spoken about, is this whole idea of performative activism, right? At the end of the day, as you just said, Jordan, like you have to walk the walk and not just talk it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's whether we're out in the street saying Black Lives Matter or whether we're saying Black Trans Lives Matter, right? I want to thank both of you all for this extended time, but certainly for the initial agreed upon time. This has been a fabulous conversation. I thank you both for just opening up so freely. To me, Gabby, you've always told me, there's no question I cannot ask you. And Jordan, I have never even had such a conversation with you. So
but my life is open. You can ask me anything. I have nothing to hide.
I really appreciate that. And that's the way I think in which we can learn, right? And from one another. And so I really, really thank you all. Are there any final words that you all would like to send to we still have 30 people hanging on with us.
God bless those 30 people for hanging on, and we appreciate that. I appreciate Vincent, you asking me to do this. Thank you, Gabby, for asking me to do this. Brian, I know you've been sitting over there just, taking it all in. Thank you for being the moderator. We appreciate you and all your emails that you sent us. But I just want to say, again, all Black lives matter when Black trans lives matter. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
I'm going to say that I want to thank you, Professor. Adore you. You know that. Thank you for allowing me to have this discussion with you. Brian, thank you for your moderating. I know that we have 30 people now. Of course, I'll give Professor Flewellen this information as well. A lot of the questions that I get after doing things like this, a lot of people are like, well, how can I show up and how can I support the trans community? And a lot of the work that I do is with local grassroots organizations here in St. Louis, right here in St. Louis. And so this shirt here that says Black Trans Lives Matter, I designed, and you can find it at philomenaandruth.com. All proceeds, 100% of the proceeds go to a fund that I have started, the STL Black Trans Community Response Fund, that will benefit Black trans women right here in St. Louis. That money goes directly into their hands for whatever they need. So when we're talking about showing up and supporting our trans siblings and our trans, sisters and brothers and things like that, I think that is what, we should be doing. So yeah, I'll make sure that Vincent has that information to include in the email if you would like to purchase a shirt, or either donate. You can also donate if you don't want to purchase the shirt. You can also donate as well. So I'll make sure that link is provided.
And Vincent, I'll make sure I'll send you the links to MTUG, which is Metro Trans Umbrella Group. They do wonderful work here in St. Louis for the trans community, and also Transparent USA. So that if parents need assistance to. And one of the things I'm going to do for Transparent is to reach out to the Black community and try to get the Black community, because we have a lot of young Black trans kids out there that need, and the families need help and direction. I see you posted your lips, Vincent, like you was getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I was. I'm like, I said we were going to wrap, and then that's just a whole nother conversation right there. We're going to have to do a part 2, because I really,
yeah,
that was a part of the conversation I wanted us to have, and we kind of touched upon it a little bit, but I kind of wanted to go a little bit deeper, which was this whole piece that where you were going was our own community and the struggles and challenges that we have within our own community around just being gay, right? Not even getting into the space of trans, right? Or non-gender conforming, right? And so that's really a good conversation, but I'm glad to hear that your work, Jordan, will touch upon that community and try to help.
So,
thank you again, Professor.
Thank you
all. Thank you. Someone wants us to make sure, yes, all the local community resources, send everything that y'all know of, right? So that we can get that out there tomorrow. All right.
Brian, you awake over there?
Everyone have a good night.
All right. Y'all have a good night. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.